Well, as long as you can see me, it's not perfect, but it'll do for now. This is my new headset that I use, which I think is a bit better. It doesn't cut out like the old one, I don't think. Uh, Welcome, people of Earth. I'm Len Potopic, the chair of the Parliament of Asgardia, and we're just waiting for people to join us here. We'll be starting in about 4 minutes. That's justified by the fact that in the last minute, 15 people joined. That's how punctual, on time we are. So, let's see. Ricky, maybe we'll have a chat, but not just now, about the thing.
I dropped out.
Pardon?
Said my link dropped out there for a moment.
Um, yeah, I said let's have a chat. Um, um, um,
Did you read my message?
yeah, I did. I'm saying I was thinking maybe we could have a discussion about that later. Just a quick one.
Sure, after this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, no compulsion, but good people need to be valued. Very simple theory. And since we're likely to be the first people to go to Mars for Asgardia, actually, we're probably not going to be the first people. There's all kinds of reasons. Um,
Yeah. Maybe send some DNA.
huh? Pardon?
Send some DNA to Mars.
Yeah. Um, yes, well, that's going to happen on the moon anyway, quite soon, I would say. So that's pretty
Yeah.
good. Right, we're going to start in 2 minutes, everybody. Just for those who are joining us around the world, I'm Len Topic, the chair of Parliament of Asgardia, the world's first space nation. And we have these weekly events in order to, not weekly, so monthly roughly events, in order to supplement the weekly meetings we have, which discuss the operational matters. Today's event is discussing the legislation that we will be dealing with at the next digital sitting of Asgardia's Parliament, which is in about 2 weeks' time. I'm just waiting to give a little bit more time for people to join, and then we'll get going. And I'm sure Ariadne's here somewhere. Um, yes, Ariadne. I haven't had a chance to send you that note yet, but I will do.
All right. Thank you very much.
Yeah. It's just time. No one has enough time. We all have all there is. Right, let's start. Welcome, everybody. Third and final time. I'm Len Topic, the chair of Asgardia, Asgardia's Parliament, the world's first space nation, and the world's first fully functioning democracy. Our mission is twofold. The first permanent space habitation, not like the International Space Station where people stay for 6 months, but space habitation where people live a lifetime. And the second goal we have is, as part of that, obviously, if you think about it logically, the first child born in space under ethical and biologically safe conditions. So I'm very pleased to uh, chair these meetings. Today is a precursor, it's a pre-meeting to our big digital parliament, which will take place on the 21st, 22nd, 23rd of February. in 2 weeks' time. Now, what I'd like to do is go through the agenda in just a minute. I've got two quick announcements as well, and then as always, I'll make a guess to the time we finish. Yeah, Friday 21st, 22nd, 23rd is our next digital sitting. So two announcements, and I'll go through the agenda, and then we'll start with the Prime Directive Act, the first reading of that. The Federal will be up first, then John Fine, then Ria, Sarah Clark, and Ria again, and then John again. The two announcements are these. First of all, we're now getting very good at doing legislation, and I have to thank John for a really superb addition to the professionalism and quality of the way that we do this. We've got the Legislative Merit Review Group, LMRG. I like to have names which sound like words, but it just seems to work, LMRG. And John chairs that. It's a non-statutory body. It's essentially an ad hoc body. It's been set up, according to the Constitution, we can do this, but it's been set up to improve the professionalism and the detail with which, and the depth with which we can look at legislation. It's great news, in fact, that we have this. So thank you to John, and also to the team. I think TJ is going to be joining that team to represent justice. I had a very good conversation with her during the week, and that should be adding value as well. It doesn't replace what we're doing, but it means that with the increasing amount of professionalism and debate which takes place on legislation, and I knew this would happen, it's not all going just through me, because that can slow things down. And now John is also in the right place at the right time to do the right thing. Second item is to say that we will have a couple of vacancies coming up for a vacancy coming up for a committee chair position. For no bad reason. I won't go into this now, but I shall announce more about this at next week's Q&A. This is just part of the process. So be aware that I'll be discussing that on next Thursday, and then I will try and address the issue at the digital sitting on day 3. Those are the main things. Let's go through the agenda today. First of all, we're going to talk about the Prime Directive Act. This is a very interesting piece of legislation, which you may think is premature. Some people think it's overdue. And that's how we interact with non-Earth life forms of any type, whether they're advanced or basic. And it's a really interesting subject. The reason it's worth doing is, number one, it's interesting, and number two, because we need to have had those conversations before we actually come across extraterrestrials. Some say that we've already had that contact. Some say that extraterrestrials are here. Some people say that we are the extraterrestrials. But it's a really interesting conversation, and it's coming from further. We're going to start with that in a short while. Then we'll talk about the second reading of the Asgardia Competition and Fair Trade Act, something that John Fine has been putting forward, one of our most experienced legislators. Then we move on to Riadel on the second reading of the Contract Act. For those who aren't familiar, if it's second reading, it means it's already been discussed once in principle at the first reading at a previous digital sitting. Then we're going to have a short discussion about the Asgardia Tax Act, short because Sarah's not too well, and we don't want to make her feel even more ill by making her talk too much. But it's a very important piece of legislation. Then we go to the Copyright Act, third reading. I should say that one of the acts has been run before, but there have been so many changes due to the LMRG. I think it's the Contract Act, and we're just doing that again. Then there's the third reading of the Copyright Act with RIA. And then we finish with the Consumer Protection Act, third reading. And that's actually a rerun from the past. We indicatively agreed it already, so that's a fairly short debate. But the idea there is to have a debate, a reminder of what's changing, and then we'll move on from there. This looks like a long agenda. I would expect it to take 2 hours. So I guess we'll be finished by about 15:15. We'll have one break in the middle. The longest, I think, this will last is 16:30. I don't really see it being more than 3.5 hours, but we'll take whatever time we need because we do have, if we need to, until 1700 UTC. That's 4 hours, but I doubt that we'll need it. We're very efficient. So, if there are no questions about that, if my sound drops out or anything, just let me know. And also, please be very happy. Feel free to intervene if you think that we're doing something incorrectly and so forth. We're a team. There are no votes today, but this is in order to make the voting time better when we get there. So the minimum time I think this will take would be 75 minutes, but I don't think it'll be quite that short. So the window, I guess, will be between 14:30 UTC and 16:30. I think that's the window. We'll be finishing at some point in that time. We don't get extra points for being long. If the whole thing takes 20 minutes, that's fine, as long as we've done everything we need to do. We judge ourselves on results, not on time. We don't get paid by the hour. We actually get progress from results. And less is more. And the shorter the meeting, the more you get your day back to do other things as well. So let's start with the first one, the Prime Directive, first reading with Ferda Inan. You should have access to all of these documents, by the way. If you haven't, then please raise your hand and let me know, and then we can put them into the chat. Ferda, good to see you. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Thank you. Welcome, everyone, and thanks for listening for Prime Directive. Actually, in the first part, we talked about the Prime Directive in the first draft, but Carl made some additions on them, and I like him to represent his additions because he will explain his thinking and he will ask questions to us. So he will continue further. After that, we will talk together what we have done with John, Carl, me, and the parliament members. I will give the word to Carl. Thank you.
Okay, thanks so much. Carl, over to you.
Good. Am I audible now?
Yes, very well. 5 out of 5.
Perfect. Sorry about that.
So be careful
yes.
what you say.
Yes. Let me share my screen. 1 second. Okay, here we go. Can everybody see this?
Oh. Yes, we can now. Yes.
Okay, awesome. So
it's now visible.
All right.
It's not very big, but we can see it. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Let me zoom in a little bit.
That's better. Much better. Yeah. Thank you.
Perfect. Awesome. Okay, so hello, Parliament. Greetings to everybody, to our colleagues. This is the Prime Directive Act of Asgardia. Previously, it was called the Galactic Non-Interference Prime Directive Act of Asgardia, but we changed it to Prime Directive Act to simplify it first and foremost. And we also realized that when we say galactic, it's a pretty confining term because Prime Directive Act is essentially a law that would refer to extraterrestrials from anywhere beyond Earth. So we don't want it to limit to galaxy because for all we know, it can come from not just Milky Way, it can from Andromeda or another galaxy, or as you know, there are also physicists are also studying the possibility of existence of other dimensions. So we really don't know it much at this point. So we want to be as inclusive as possible. So we're calling it Prime Directive Act of Asgardia. So this is the latest version updated today. So the primary sponsor is Ferda, and then I made some updates to it. So this is the preamble. The space nation of Asgardia, recognizing its profound responsibility as humanity's first space nation and historic significance of potential contact with extraterrestrial civilizations, hereby establishes this Prime Directive Act to ensure the ethical conduct of all interactions with extraterrestrial life forms and civilizations. As humanity ventures further into the cosmos, we acknowledge our duty to protect and preserve the natural development of extraterrestrial civilizations, maintain the integrity of their cultural evolution, and foster peaceful coexistence in the universe. This act represents our commitment to ethical space exploration, responsible scientific scientific advancement and the fundamental principle of non-interference with the natural development of extraterrestrial civilizations, while establishing comprehensive guidelines for situations where contact becomes inevitable or necessary. I will go into detail later. In doing so, Asgardia seeks to set a precedent for responsible interstellar relations and establish itself as a leader in ethical space exploration, ensuring that humanity's expansion into space promotes universal harmony rather than disruption or dominance. So as you can see here from the preamble, simply put, this highlights the principle of non-interference. And then we go on to the legal basis. This act is promulgated pursuant to Article 4, Section 4A and C of the Constitution, establishing peace in space and safeguarding planet Earth from space-originating threats as supreme values, in conjunction with Article 23, Sections 1 and 2, mandating the monitoring and prevention of space-originating threats to implement Asgardia's constitutional obligations regarding peaceful space exploration and planetary protection. And then the second basis is the Act on Acts, Section 2, establishing that all laws shall be made in accordance with the supreme values and interests of Asgardia, and Section 5, maintaining that acts shall embody and enhance the rights, duties, and values and will of Asgardian citizens. And then the third act would be the Foreign Affairs Act, which was recently passed, specifically Section 3.6, which establishes a framework for space diplomacy, outlining how Asgardia will engage with nations and international organizations regarding space exploration, mission protocols, and resource sharing. Section 12.1 and 12.2 provide legal basis for respecting and addressing space law and governance regulations, while 13.4 supports Asgardia's commitment to creating protocols for potential first contact with extraterrestrial life. And then we move on to the core principles. There are 5, so we put that in, we itemize them here. The Prime Directive Act represents Asgardia's commitment to ethical space exploration and the principle of non-interference with ETs. As humanity's first base nation, we establish these principles to ensure the protection of natural development, maintenance of cultural integrity, and proper protocols for situations where contact becomes inevitable or necessary. So number 1 is non-interference. The absolute prohibition of interference with pre-spaceflight civilizations must be maintained, including prevention of technological contamination and protection of cultural development. Number 2 is development protection. Natural evolutionary processes must be preserved, including technological development timelines, cultural evolution patterns, and prevention of artificial acceleration or deceleration. Number 3, cultural preservation. Indigenous knowledge systems must be protected, including cultural practices, social structures, artistic expressions, and historical records. Number 4 is scientific standards. Research activities must utilize passive observation technologies with detection prevention measures, regular calibration, and peer review. And number 5 would be systematic classification. All contact decisions must be based on clear classification of civilizations by their technological capabilities and implemented through graduated protocols. From here on, I'm just going to go let everybody see how the article looks like. Supposedly, this is going to be a presentation, but I wanted everybody to see the raw document as it is. This has a slightly different arrangement from other bills that we have seen in Parliament, simply because of the complexity of this matter. Is, we tried to, initially it was a very long document, and then we got shortened, and then now we have this current version. So yes, this is now simply the Prime Directive Act of Asgardia. Section 1, Article 1 is the general provisions. You can see Section 1 for title and scope of the purpose. And then here we put on Section 3 are the definitions. So this is not a complete list yet. Here you can see that we have defined Asgardian entity. You can see that we have defined contact. There is also a contact assessment board. I'll get into that in a minute. And then contact protocol, what cultural contamination means, and all these other terms that are used throughout, that you can find in this bill. Here is one thing that is pretty important to address. Here in Section 4, Article 1, you can see the development classification system. This is actually based on the Kardashev scale. And we are, in the Foreign Affairs Committee, we are hoping to work with physicists on refining this classification system, because right now the Kardashev scale is the one model that we can look into when we're trying to identify or determine the development phase of a hypothetical extraterrestrial civilization. So you can see here that we have type 0, 1, 2, 3. And here in section 5, you can see the contact classification system. So when we try, so this is first when we are able to identify, for example, what type of civilization we're dealing with, then we're going to see which contact would be appropriate. So for example, class A contact shall be designated as 0 contact, so applicable to type 0. So again, what is type 0? We go back here and we see that these are pre-industrial civilizations demonstrating energy usage. So these are specific numbers that we would, of course, need to get checked. Basically limited technological development. So I guess that would be us, type 0. And then here you have, yes, contact. Scientific, Article 2 is more on the scientific standards. So this is more of a list, as you can see here. We're not going to get into that right now. I'm really just presenting to Parliament the overview of how this is going to look like, because again, this is a pretty, this is a foundational legislation. So it's very, very important that we go about this very carefully. Article 3 would be the operational protocol. So essentially, this act, I believe, personally, I believe that this would be the most cited reference, would be the protocols, because essentially this act tries to answer the question, what are we supposed to do, right? What are we supposed to do when we meet extraterrestrials? And so here it is, the operational protocols. First, you have contact protocol. So obviously, this is a very summarized version of what we are supposed to do: initial assessment, authorization process, and implementation. And then you have emergency response, because of course we are anticipating scenarios in which contact would be inevitable, perhaps accidental situations. It must be pointed out, by the way, that the Prime Directive Act would apply to all Asgardians. So let's say we are, just to paint a scenario, to picture for everybody, for example, that we are in the year 3000, for example, and we are in a space station somewhere. So Asgardia will have a colony somewhere, right? So, and in a scenario in which we have not, for some reason, we have not identified or we have not detected an extraterrestrial civilization on this particular location, then we are at risk of contaminating them, especially if they're the ones who have been there first. So essentially, what are we supposed to do? So this is the emergency scenario. And then response protocols would be here. Article 4 and Article 5 are basically the things that must be done by the government and the people implementing the law and international cooperation. This is all based on, of course, existing UN protocols that we have at the moment, which is why this part is still very short. This is arbitrary. For example, the implementation timeline, you can see phase 1 comprising months 0 through 6 shall include the establishment of administrative bodies, development of detailed procedures, initial staff recruitment, and so on. So as you can see, this really gives it the space for future amendments, because again, we're looking a little bit too forward into the future about this. So we want to make sure that there is room and space for a development in this regard. And final provisions, we have to still review this with the Act on Acts. So yes, this is how the document looks like right now. We believe that in the committee, we believe this is very comprehensive at this point. We're trying to still really look into other technical aspects of it, especially what I mentioned earlier about the classification, because that will be the one that will be really important. So yes, that would be all for now. I yield the floor back to Chairman Limbit.
Further, back to further.
Oh, to further, all right.
Further?
Thank you very much. Yes, I'm here. I totally liked his work on Prime Directive, and we discussed it a lot. And on the merits group, we will be talking about it detailed. But if any other Parliament members like to join our discussion, we will be happy to discuss it together today. So we are waiting for your opinions. Thank you. Thank you, Carl, by the way. It was a good job. Thank you very much.
It's really interesting. Yes, I agree with Ferda. Thank you, Carl. There's been a lot of discussion about this, but there hasn't really been any legislation. No one's ever done it like this before. And just as we use United Nations templates for some of our work, perhaps the United Nations will use our templates for their work on this eventually. It remains to be seen if that's the case. Let's go to John. John.
Yes. Yeah, Carl, can you put the preamble back up?
Of course. 1 second. Let me share that again. Oh, wait, where is that button?
Because I was thinking about this earlier, and then as you're reading it struck me again. You know, right now it's kind of set up as what could happen, but I think we should also include what very well may happen. Okay, and let's see here. Let's see. First Nation modern profound First Nation. Everybody says prime directive ensure that. Okay, where it says act to ensure ethical conduct of all interactions with extraterrestrial life forms and civilizations. Could we add, and this is just a suggestion, could we also add in there planetary and celestial bodies? Because our interactions is not just going to be with intelligent life form, but it also may be with non-intelligent life form. A simple virus or something like that. And we were definitely, when Asgardia does its mission in the very beginning, we're definitely going to interact with celestial bodies like an asteroid or a moon or something of this nature, even Mars, for instance. And we should have the same standard of approaching those things as we would, even if it was an intelligent life form. So I think it would be appropriate to add that in there because, you know, what if we wipe out, say this planet has a life form and our just human interaction on that planet wipes that life form out. And of course, let's say it's a single cell organism and we just wipe that entire organism out. Was that right for us to do that? You know, and that's a good question. So I for one would like to see us develop that too. What we would do in those situations. Um, Also um, in your core principles, I was wondering if you could
Yes.
maybe consider adding resource sharing and future proofing under the core principles.
This is currently in PDF, but just to tell everyone, I am noting the suggestions. Sorry, John, you were saying? Can you repeat what you?
Resource sharing and future proofing. When I say resource sharing, yeah, and future proofing.
Okay.
The reason I say resource sharing, okay, say we're out there and we are engaging with the Prime Directive and we've met several different species and they come to us uh, to and want some of our resources. for a specific purpose. Or let's say that it's a species we haven't interacted with, and we know that our resources could maybe prevent a catastrophe on their planet, like medical resources. Would that be enough reason to involve ourselves with this species? As long as it's just on a medical and not a technological standpoint, and that the medicine we can offer it's not going to really, it will help prevent their planet from the catastrophe, but it won't really interfere with their natural growth of their society. Or some could argue that it will. So, that could be a problem. So, anyway, that was just a thought that went through my head. Yeah.
Thank you for that.
But I am 100% for this because I do think that it's necessary. I do think that humankind will, on some level in the future, interact with other species. Uh, and do I believe in extraterrestrials? It is easier for me to believe that they exist than to believe that they don't. And the reason why is because space is a very vast area. It's huge. And there are literally billions and billions and billions of planets and solar systems and and galaxies out there. And that's been proven scientifically. There's more than we can count. So to think that the only life that exists out of all that is human life is is impossible. It's actually more probable that there is other life. Now, we may never get to that life, yes, or that life may never get to us because space is it takes a long distance to get from point A to point B, and it takes a lot of technology, but our technology is improving considerably. In the last 10 years, our technology has boomed in ways that nobody ever dreamed of. So it's not impossible. So, yeah, I'm glad to see us developing this act. I would look forward to uh, bringing it into the LMRG and developing it.
Let me just take Ariadne's point, and then we'll go to, and see if anybody else comes up. Then we'll go back to Ferda and Carl. So, Ariadne.
All right, thank you very much. I totally agree with John Fine about these comments, because it's true. Maybe regarding the panspermia, we are aliens also, and we need to protect all the life around the galactic environments. Why not? And I think in the people in the Earth, we are aliens because we are living here, because we have the possibilities, not in other places of the world, of the galactic or the galaxy or other planets. But the behavior to connect with the other in Asgardia is the spirit of the Constitution. And that piece of legislation has that spirit, and I like it so much. When John talking about the hybrid with the extraterrestrials or people or not people around, I remember my novel when the explorers find worms and they don't kill them. They need to discover the behavior of that kind of animals in an stranger planet that they visit. Uh, this is important. I think it's important because we need to create the idea around the world, also here in her planet, that we need to connect with the other to discover how they do, how they can to connect with us. I saw many pictures, though. Oh, the extraterrestrials go with all the army, combat them, and it's impossible. Maybe that people, if we discover something, or they discover us, wants to connect with all of us in some kind of style or some kind of way. No, that's good. I like it so much. Carl, congratulations.
I agree with that. Thank you. Let's go to Corner next.
Good afternoon. I was thinking that we have discussed this at a previous point. I have noticed that the word colony has been used. The word colony, colonization, this often implies power imbalances associated, of course, with our past with colonization. So I would like to suggest that if this act could, instead of using the word colony, consider instead maybe settlement or something similar. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, there are certain words which have got a lot of political meaning on Earth. Colonization isn't a phrase that Asgardia uses very much for that reason. Ricky.
Yeah. On Corner's point, I'm going to disagree on that because it's just a word. And it means that a group of individuals go from one place that's maybe overpopulated and they find somewhere else that's empty, no one around or anything, and they build their little colony there, just real quick. The other, on the point that John brought up about like medical treatment, there could be, depending on the development of a species, introducing any kind of medicine, depending on where they're at in their development, could possibly influence their medical technology. So that's something that would have to be really, really thought of. Granted, you don't want another species to die and such, but you may have to covertly introduce the antidote or treatment or whatever. That's just something that I thought about when John was talking about his thing. That's it.
Thank you. Let's go to Corner. Oh, just before Corner's comments, I have to say the medical one is an interesting one because it assumes that species would consider us to be worth saving. One of the biggest concerns we all have is that cross-contamination of viruses could destroy us or them. There's a film from the early 1970s called The Andromeda Strain, which covers this very point. It's a very interesting film. It's a brilliant film, actually. It's a classic. It's a minor classic. It never made it that to become that famous, but I think it covers the point well. So, Corner.
Sorry, just 2 points there on the medical treatment. Even on planet Earth, treating someone for a medical condition, you need their consent or their approval if we are talking about ethics. And then, secondly, Ricky, I don't think you understand the severity, the gravitas of the word colony, colonizer for people who live in countries that has been colonized. So I think in order to maintain sensitivity towards everyone, words do have power and words do matter. Thank you.
Words only have as much power as you give. And I don't give certain words power because it's totally ridiculous to do so. And as far as colonizing, everyone's colonized everybody else on this planet at one time or another, and people can argue that forever. But simple truth is everybody has moved everywhere and everyone's from everywhere else. So history is what history is, and you learn from it and you go on and don't worry about the silly stuff. That's all I got to say.
Yeah, that we can continue with this. I have to say, just personally speaking, I would say that it's not necessary to use the word colonization on the basis that I don't think this is woke. I don't think this is right on. I think that it's so loaded that then we have to explain why we're using it when there are other words that we can use, like inhabit or have residency of, and so forth. But I do know that by precedent, we very rarely use the word colonization. So it's not that you're wrong, Ricky. You could even argue other people who load these words up are wrong, but it happens, and that's the issue. Other people get wound up about those words, and I've been very concerned recently about various celebrities in the UK who've ended up in trouble for apparently saying offensive things. Well, people don't offend others. We choose to be offended, and that's a philosophical conversation, maybe a psychological one. In reality, though, it works better. It works effectively if we can find other words, synonyms, which don't have the same loaded relevance. But I think this is something we don't need to go further into just now. John.
Yes, and I agree with you on that one. In the political, that would be called a politically loaded word, and it would be a slippery slope, and we'd want something more stable. Anytime a word that's considered a slippery slope or an action, it may go one way, it may go the other. You just don't know how. You're on a slippery slope, and you could slip off and crash and burn, or you could survive. And so you would try to find something a little bit more stable to go with. So yeah, settlement's fine, but also I wanted to say that we have about roughly depends on who you ask and what uh, uh, scientists or whatever you ask, but we have an impressive human history that can actually be used as a model to help model what we will and what we won't do. And instead of looking at our history as this civilization, that civilization, look at those as expanding in planets or expanding in universes, right? And look at the interaction between those that historical evidence, and you can actually use that as a model of what could very well happen when you're out there in space. And how one the history contaminated the other, or how medical contaminated, or whatever. There's a really impressive human history that shows that on a civilization level. But instead of thinking those as civilizations, like say like here in the United States, the American Indian was completely just about obliterated, because of an industrial type group of people coming in, Europeans mostly, and and expanding in industry, right? So there's all kinds of examples of how that could happen in space. So instead of thinking them as like a different going to a different country or think of it going to a different planet and use it in that reference. I think that would be very useful.
Thanks, John. That's very helpful. Thank you. Let's go to Sarah next.
Good morning. First and foremost, I would like to congratulate Ferda and Carl on this legislation. I think if you consider their presentation in toto, I think that it is an amazing launching point for what I'm sure will be an amazing third reading. But just really, it shows terms aside, it shows like not only our determination to make sure that our exploration and our footprint in space is fair, but that it is safe. And I think it's very, very forward thinking. And all said and told, I very much like the legislation. I think it's wonderful in scope and in contents, and I'm very impressed. So congratulations.
Totally agree. And it's exciting. It's why people are interested in space. It's one of the reasons why we do this. One key reason I think it's good for us to have this discussion is because it reminds us of what we're here to do. And so credit to Ferda for that. Any other comments from anybody here before we go back to Carl and then finally Ferda? Okay, Carl.
Yes, my bad. I was still gonna raise my hand.
No problem. No. Good, very
First of
polite.
all, I wanted to respond to. Sorry about that. First of all, I wanted to respond to John. John, thank you very much for your suggestions. These are all very critical inputs. These are points that the current version lacks. So rest assured that we're definitely going to study what you have suggestions, especially the part about medical contamination. Medical necessity of this thing. And also, I would also like to thank Corina. Thank you, Corina, for raising your point. We are definitely working hard to, in the committee at least, we are definitely working hard to ensure that the words we use are accurate, are precise, and in the event that they are loaded or nuanced, are explained very thoroughly. So the Foreign Affairs Committee reiterates our position on acknowledging critical events in history, how they shape us today. And also as a committee, we also want to stress that we support inclusivity. We value a diversity of ideas. And this is also why I want to stress that this legislation is really poised to be a collaborative piece of work. As you can see, as you have seen, there are parts of the bill that would need inputs from technical specialists, maybe our friends from the science committee, insights from Ricky and the security committee, and so on. So really, Ferda and I are very open, and the rest of the committee, of course, are very open and are listening very closely to all suggestions. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll just add one thing before we go back to Ferda, and then we'll move on to John Fine and Fair Trade Act. This is exciting because it's serious that we know what to do when this happens. John said that it's unimaginable to him that we are the only life forms on Earth or in the universe. I'd say to him, how do you know? You haven't been there? But I actually agree with him. Statistically speaking, there are two reasons there could be life elsewhere. The first reason is because life begins in lots of places like Earth, and there are lots of places like Earth. So and it could be another kind of planets as well, but if life needs Earth's conditions to start, it will have had trillions of opportunities to do that through the universe, because there will be trillions of planets like Earth. There are probably certainly millions of planets like Earth, even in our own galaxy. And if you think about it, if there are a million planets like Earth in our galaxy, where there are billions of planets, then with billions of galaxies, there'll be like tens of trillions of planets like Earth. And it just seems unlikely that if life started here, then it wouldn't start somewhere else as well. Second thought is this: even if it didn't, we know that life can splash into space when there are impacts and be contained within rocks, for example. So this concept, transpermia, the communication of life from one place to another across billions of years will have happened. It just will have happened. It could be life started on Mars and came here, or the other way around. These are very rare events, but if you have long enough, then even rare events occur. And then there's a third point which I'll share just after John. John, do you want to come in, and then I'll finish my third point, and then go to you, John. No, John, you, and then my third point. Go ahead.
Something you just said just reminded me. I was listening to NASA's blog that they have. They're on space, what's going on, keeping you update. Anyway, they've been studying this rock, Bennu, this asteroid Bennu, they call it, and they have found now, and it's not because cross contamination, as some people thought it might have been. Now that they have definitely figured out that it has I can't remember, it was 3 or 4, but all the elements it takes to create life, it had. Okay, and not from cross contamination. It was in this asteroid. This asteroid that's many times older than Earth. That they went and got a sample off of. It had the elements that it would take to create life. So that's interesting. Now it's been proven scientifically that an asteroid, just a dead rock in space, has those elements. So what he just said, now they're of course there's going to be a lot of papers come out on that, and they're going to be theorizing about how if one of those asteroids hit Earth, what would it take to create life on Earth? And that's all in the future, looking in the future. So anyway, thank you. I just wanted to mention that. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, John. I'll make one last comment. It's this. It's a slightly different point now to the one that John made, but here's the last thing. I was speaking to a professor who I hope will address us at some time, who believes that that life goes all over the universe by spreading, and he's actually probably one of the most important people in it. It's called Professor Wick Ramasinghe, and he works in Cardiff. And he said this to me. He thought that life is so rare, so unlikely, that perhaps it only occurred one time in the universe. And I said, why? He said, because I think that it might take the entire power of the universe to make it start just once, and then it spread from that. That's what he thought. It's just an interesting idea. Further doesn't agree with that. I don't know where I stand with it, but either way, we get to the same place, that there will be lots of life all over the universe. And for that, we need this legislation. But sooner or later, we'll find something that we consider to be life. So wherever you start, this is where you need to end. But this last word to Ferda, and then we move on. Ferda.
Thank you. My first intention was also show people that we are not that unique. If we are here, we don't know the outsiders, and we need to find different ways to explore them. Not only in our range capacity, but we need to find other capacities to understand or recognize them. So Prime Directive will also be the leader of the ways of exploring the other life types, and also will be maybe a light to the thinkers that there are other ways of life that we cannot understand with smelling or hearing or other things. We need to explore that kind of science. Also, we need to find converters about other lives to show itself to us. It's important for us to work and think of it. So maybe this will light the people's minds, and we finally start to talk about it and brainstorm about it.
Mm-hmm. I agree. I agree with you. I think it helps us think bigger. When you start thinking like this, the fact that animals fight each other on the planet between countries and nations, and we are basically animals of some sort, is ridiculous. It's ridiculous because most of the universe is uninhabited. Even in our own solar system, most of it is completely empty. And we sit here fighting about territory that we don't even own. We just live on, we inhabit. And I think Ariadne made the point that we often, and the head of nation uses the phrase populate. Yeah. Pale blue dot, it says that in our national anthem, and we fight over territory on a tiny little globe, which a million light years from here wouldn't even be seen. Thank you very much. Really interesting conversation. And we'll get to first reading vote on that at the next sitting. Let's move on. I thought that'd be an interesting conversation, actually. Let's move on to something we've discussed before, and probably we'll make fairly fast progress on the rest. Asgardia Competition and Fair Trade Act, second reading with John.
Thank you, Lambert. I appreciate that. Thank
John, you've just muted yourself again, John.
I'm using my computer is ultra sensitive to that.
Uh-huh.
Okay, let's see here. Share screen, where we at?
Just while John's getting that ready, these other items we've covered before, so probably they'll be fairly quick. I'll be covering items 4 and 6 for that reason as well in part. John, over to you.
All right, introducing the Asgardia Competition and Fair Trade Act. I decided to go ahead since the act has gotten so large. You can go and look in the Parliament documents and you can see the document for yourself. I decided to do a summary of the document. And instead of going over the entire document, uh, because it's gotten kind of large and it would take a really long time. Hold on, try to minimize. There we go. All right. And this is edition 21 December 2024. Which reminds me, Lambert, I made a slight mistake on the tracking page on this one, on the dates, but
We need to just, if it's important, we can change it. But
yeah.
just if you let Linda know, and then she'll make the change.
Okay. The Asgardia Competition Fair Trade Act establishes a thorough legislative framework aimed at fostering fair competition and curbing anti-competitive practice in both domestic and international markets. Its goal is to safeguard consumers from unethical business tactics and to ensure equitable competition by banning monopolies, price fixing, unfair mergers, and other anti competitive behaviors. In the preamble and core principles, the essential principles of the Act focus on encouraging fair and competitive trade, adhering to international best practices, enhancing economic growth through equitable competition, and safeguarding small and medium sized enterprises, SMEs. It aligns with United Nations guidelines and global standards to reinforce its international coherence. The legal authority, this act is based on the foundational principles and guidelines outlined in the Asgardia Constitution, guaranteeing consistency with the core values of the Asgardia Society. Its purpose, the goal is to ensure fair competition and prevent unfair practices in both digital and non-digital markets, especially in mergers and acquisitions, to protect Asgardian consumers and foster economic development. In the definitions, the Act offers clear definitions of crucial terms like abuse of dominance, excuse me, antitrust bundling claim, cartel, excuse me, my breakfast is trying to come up. Anyway, cartel, consumer, and competition, ensuring clarity in enforcement processes. Obstructive agreements and arrangements. The Act forbids agreements among competing companies that involve setting prices, concluding in tenders, dividing markets, and other actions that limit competition. Abusive market power behaviors. The Act defines and forbids practices that abuse dominant market power, including predatory pricing, discriminatory pricing, and refusal to engage in honorable competitive transactions. Notifications. Enterprises must notify the Trade Investigative Authority, TIA, of business practices that fall within specified articles, providing comprehensive details as requested. Mergers, takeovers, joint ventures. The Act requires notification and potential prohibition of mergers, takeovers, and joint ventures that could lead to excessive market power or reduced competition. Consumer protections. The Act honors consumer protection legislation from Asgardia and Earth nations, ensuring they are legally binding and relative to antitrust and competition laws. Regulatory framework. The Act establishes regulatory bodies like the Trade and Commerce Authority, TIA, to oversee and enforce fair trade practices, with provisions for oversight and regulatory bodies, other regulatory bodies. Sanctions and tariffs. Sanctions or tariffs can be imposed for violations of the Act, non-compliance with TIA decisions, or providing false information. Appeal process. Enterprises or individuals can appeal the TIA decisions to the Asgardia Judicial Authority or the Supreme Space Council, with specific timelines for filing appeals. Digital ecosystems. The Act addresses digital ecosystems, ensuring they adhere to fair competition principles and protect privacy and human rights. Global fair trade sustainability. Asgardia adopts principles aligned with the United Nations and World Trade Organization to ensure sustainable, fair trade, and competition practices globally. This act serves as the essential foundation for all trade and commerce acts, creating the framework necessary for Asgardia's trade and commerce activities. It equips Asgardia with the required legal tools to promote fair and responsible trade, fostering a successful business and trading hub. The hub at www.asgardia.trade symbolizes our entry point to a dynamic economic force, which can be fully achieved when both Asgardians and Earthlings engage with it as intended. And that's the ending. Ready for questions, comments, and suggestions. Thank you.
Thanks, John. As always, very comprehensive presentation. I've got nothing to add really, because this shows the LMRG works. It's an effective way of putting things together. And since you're chairing the LMRG, it better be good. Anybody got any questions for this? I haven't. I'm happy with it to go the way it is, but if anyone's got questions, then feel free to raise your hand now. John's raising his own hand. Interesting. I'm going to ask John to make a few comments about the Contract Act in a minute as well. In fact, in a way, this is almost becoming your show because of all the work you're doing with the LMRG. I'm just here to chair it. Okay, my view is that it's ready to go to second reading and pretty close to ready to be at third reading. We actually said a long time ago that if it was good enough, something would go from first to third without having to pass through second. But I don't think we'll ever do that. My opinion is that, generally speaking, so I've got nothing else specific to say about this piece of legislation, and you've covered everything, I think. My feeling is that we're so ready to set up the economy. It's frustrating we haven't got the economy running now, because we've already got enough of a basic framework of legislation to make that work. And I would trust that with this and the Consumer Protection Act, we've got something at every level, manufacture, from supply, from sales, from marketing, from copyright, as we'll see with the Riedel piece of legislation, right through to consumer protection. And we're ready to go. So my last comment is that on this, I'll then hand over to John, and unless anyone else raises their hand, we'll move on to the Contract Act. John.
Yes. Well, we did have with the Justice, both the Justice, well, actually the Justice Ministry did send us some last minute evaluations that we wasn't able to, in the LMRG group, we wasn't able to get integrated into it for the second reading.
Yeah.
So we're going to implement those in the third reading, or at least we're going to debate them or consider them and see how they fit into the existing. So there will be some small differences between the second and in the third reading if any of those recommendations get into that. So I just wanted to mention that.
Yeah, well, that's the process that we've got. I think our process works very well. We don't often say this, but I think it works really well. We actually almost forget how well it works in the same way that if you're not in pain, you forget you're healthy. And you only then remember how well it was like to not be in pain when you are in pain. Okay, thank you, John. That's really good and a great piece of work. So that goes to second reading at the next digital sitting in 2 weeks' time. We're on track, I think, for probably about another hour and a half of work, if that's okay with people. I'm thinking of see how long it takes, but we're thinking of having a break after the Tax Act, just a short 5-minute break or so. Let's see how long it takes. Next, we've got the Asgardia Contract Act. Now, Ria hasn't said to me she's happy just to let it go to you for consideration. A little bit of explanation. This has actually come around a second time because there were so many changes. I'll ask John to explain that in a minute. Just there are a lot of changes on account of feedback, but I think it's in a good state. And the Contract Act is just one of those elements of legislation which is relevant to business. In the past, I have perhaps slightly naively thought, well, we don't really need much legislation for business, but when it comes to money, human nature means you have to have protection. That's really important. And in that sense, having a Contract Act, which is a protection, it stops bad things from happening. It doesn't necessarily make good things happen, but it stops bad things from happening. It's probably necessary. There's another important reason this is significant, and here's why. It's because we've got to interact with the terrestrial world, maybe aliens as well, extraterrestrials too, but the terrestrial world. And that can be a difficult place to do business. So the Contract Act also takes account of that. And I think that's another important reason why we can't just act in good faith, even if we think all Asgardians are good people. So those are some of the reasons why this is so important. I want to ask John, do you want to explain just the big feedback that we got for this? Ria's happy, by the way. She's confirmed to me she's absolutely happy with this and she doesn't need to contribute to this discussion. So, John.
Yeah, well, you know, in the LMRG, I value all the input that we get. Every input that we get is valued and is considered. We don't. Nobody's input is just set aside. Oh yeah, we're not gonna consider that. No, that's not the case. Everybody that contributes, those contributions are considered at one point or the other. Okay, it was unfortunate that my wife decided to have a appendicitis right at the time that my deadline was to get this stuff in. And so I was literally at the hospital worrying about my wife and texting and using my phone to get these legislation to you. But there was some really good observations made on the Contract Act that I wasn't able to get integrated in time. I have those in reserve, and so I decided it would be best if we cycle it through one time to ensure that it gets those considerations. And they were coming, of course, from the Justice Department. It's hard to say. You know, justice is like a unit. I can say ministry, I can say committee, but it's like they're one unit. So I guess I'll just say Justice Department. It's coming from the justice area, and I want to ensure that those get integrated. So it was my decision to go ahead and cycle it through, and that's all it's being done is so that these considerations can be properly addressed for that particular act, and that's the only reason I cycled it through.
Thanks, John. I don't have any issue with you doing that. I think it makes sense. And there's so much. It's a judgment call. Part of this is it's not about being pedantic. It's about doing the right thing and getting the best result. And as Chair of Parliament, this is a sort of judgment call that we have to make all the time, I think. I've realized in this role. Does anyone have any other comments or questions on it? Because I'm satisfied that it's ready to go. In which case, I'm happy to move on. It's so well put together now. I don't feel that there's a point in particularly going through the details. Ricky says fine. Yeah, I do as well. I think John agrees. So we're going to leave that there. We'll have a proper look at it, second reading. Ria will present it formally then. I hope it goes through. I can't see any reason to resist passing this. So thank you for that. Now, somebody who's, I think, got a lot better is next. He's so infectious that I'm coughing just thinking about it now. It's Sarah Clark. the chair of finance, who is moving forward with the Tax Act. It's a big deal because this is how we're meant to pay for everything. And in the expectation that we will be turning over billions, we need to turn over billions to make things happen. Even if we use cheap launch services such as Elon Musk, we need to have a tax system. Now, the context of this is that Dr. Asher Bailey, our founder, the founder of Asher, and the head of Asgardia, he is essentially a head of state. He wants us to have the most attractive tax regime in the world. That's a pretty demanding ambition from the head of nation, but I think it's a good one. And part of that will be the tax system. So, Sarah, over to you. I'm glad you're a bit better, but talk a little or as much as you feel able. Over to you.
Good morning. Apologize for the scratchiness of my throat. Okay.
You sound okay.
Well, thank you. Okay, can everyone see my screen?
Yes, it's quite small again, but
Yes,
it's okay. You might want to enlarge it a little bit.
Yes, sir. Okay.
It's quite legible. That's fine. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
fine. Yeah.
Okay. Well, yeah. Okay. First and foremost, I would like to thank the LMRG, John Fine, Minister Spear, Ministers Bogan, and all of those who gave input for this act. I feel that it's an amazing step forward, not only in just being quite comprehensive, but in holding true to what I hope are the wishes of head of nation. So, with that being said, I'm not going to read the whole thing. It is 10 pages. I will drop the link to the two translations into the chat. It is available through not only our Slack channel, but on the on our G Drive. But there's a lot of information here, and I want to make sure that I appropriately represent it. Okay. So the preamble and the core principles have not changed much. The Act plays a crucial role in fostering a resilient and innovative digital economy for Asgardia. It establishes a fair, transparent, and efficient taxation structure for the citizens and businesses of Asgardia. Taxes are levied exclusively in solars, supporting Asgardia's sovereignty and promoting a robust Asgardian economy. And we have expanded the core principles slightly. It now includes digital sovereignty, transparency and public trust, simplicity and accessibility, adaptability and future-proofing, sustainability, social responsibility, fairness, and now circular involvement, which means creating a circular tax system developed to foster unity where everyone is a contributor and earnestly does their part to advance Asgardia's pursuits in both Earth and space. Articles are as follows: purpose, definitions, tax categories, licensing and intellectual property, financial transparency and public reporting, taxpayers' rights and protections, future-proofing and adaptive tax laws, enforcements and penalties, and social contributions and community investments. I will say I promise by the time we get to the digital sitting, I will have a presentation. I apologize for not having one ready today. The purpose of this act is to encompass the rules, policies, guidelines, and cross-border regulatory instruments that governs how the Asgardian government collects, manages, and enforces taxes. It plays a significant role in our nation's economic structure and affects residents and enterprises. I'm not going to go through all the definitions. As you can see, there are quite a few. I will say that John Fine and the LMRG have done a painstaking job making sure that this tax law dovetails with not only the acts on acts, but all the applicable Asgardian legislation that is in the works and that has already been passed. So I'm very impressed with the work that the LMRG has done. Okay, tax categories. I think this is where most people have questions. The Asgardian space nation, well, the following tax categories. Territorial, which is a tax levied on enterprises operating commercial businesses transactions, whether digital or physical, within the territory as the Asgardian space nation. Residential, the fixed term residential tax in the form of a fee paid annually by residents joining Asgardia for the first time or those renewing their resident fee status, aka the resident fee. Contractually, any tax obligations that are assessed during negotiations of a contract that culminates explicitly for Asgardia Space Nation. Administrative taxes, tax assessed in licensing, specific fees, civil services, and intellectual property. And finally, voluntary, a social tax applied to voluntary investments in bonds, 401k, stocks, insurance, education, business startups, and other investment areas that the Asgardian government is authorized to make available. All these tax categories will be issued tax identification numbers by the ministry. Reporting requirements will be annual. They're fixed and variable depending on the circumstance within the tax. They're collected digitally and physically. The Asgardian finance minister is authorized to provide information on how fixed and variable rates are assessed, who they apply to, and what area they apply to, why they are assessed, and any other information needed to keep businesses and residential Asgardian societies informed. The purpose of this act is to be incredibly transparent, and I hope that we have achieved that. The Asgardian finance minister is set to authorize, I'm sorry, the finance minister is authorized to set an annual tax percentage rate, TRP, that cannot drop below 1% except through incentives, or exceed 10% except through contractual agreements, through legal instruments, as the tax contributors pay by tax identity through a digital or physical means made that fiscal year. Ministry. Okay, to promote fairness in tax matters, it is essential to acknowledge that not all individuals or businesses can contribute equally. Startups and smaller enterprises often have less capacity to meet tax obligations than larger corporations. The Ministry of Finance will ensure fairness by implementing a reasonable, progressive tax structure based on each identity's capabilities, considering fees, rates, rules, incentives, and other obligations. Social investment areas include, but are not limited to, occupational retirement. I love that the British use the word schemes. Medical services schemes, investment schemes, manufacturing schemes, lending services schemes, educational services schemes, enterprise startup schemes, enterprise expansion, research and development, science exploration, humanitarian, and environmental. No taxes will be levied on any profits, investment trades, or any other methods of enterprise and individual transactions of collecting, saving, or receiving monies made outside the territory of Asgardia or collected from outside the territory of Asgardia, unless they are within a contractual agreement that all parties agree to. I know that this was a question that we had by numerous MPs during the first reading. Profits made by Asgardian enterprises that make contractual agreements are taxable as net profits and must be reported in its annual reporting. Exclusions from these rules are any contractual agreement made between an Asgardian enterprise or individual and the government at Asgardia. In such cases, the contractual agreement supersedes any provisions within the tax law. Move forward. Okay, this too pertains to the questions that I've received on Slack. Any Earth or territories not relating to Asgardia outside of Earth, non-contractual or non-registered individuals or enterprises working within the territory of Asgardia, as I'm so sorry, as in a digital nomad, typically is not subject to tax if they are already responsible for paying taxes within another territory. I think that's very important to point out because the number one question I've received is about double taxation. All government officials working for Asgardia in the territory of Asgardia receive some form of compensation from Asgardia are subject to administrative tax. Licensing and intellectual property. There's a lot here, so let me see if I can hit the high points or any changes that have been made. Asgardia's IP tax jurisdiction includes any registered IP created, developed, maintained, owned, rented, solid, or otherwise managed exclusively within the jurisdiction and the space nation of Asgardia. Now, I would like to once again point out that the LMRG and John have worked very, very, very hard to make sure that this dovetails brilliantly with the legislation put forward by Riadel. So if you have any questions specifically pertaining to that, please let me know. But I think that they've done a really, really, really good job helping me make sure that everything is included. Excuse me 1 second. I'm so sorry. Financial transparency and public reporting. This is the second most asked question that I've received. Minister of Finance creates and maintains a tax reporting system. Since Asgardia has relations with Earth nations, and tax reporting systems must be able to integrate legally, securely, and transparently through automated information exchanges with internationally accepted tax systems that provide equal access to the 13 Earth districts of Asgardia. Tax reporting systems will align with current Asgardian laws governing security, IP, citizens' rights, and other related information necessary to the reporting tax. In developing a tax reporting system, the finance minister is authorized to implement administrative systems appropriate to the finance and timeline progression of Asgardia. The system can have agencies, working groups, tax forces, organizations, employees, duty, appointments, fees, and other measures for implementation and management. All of this is to say that as we grow, we need the room to expand and make sure that we are adequately providing services to the citizens of Asgardia. Taxpayer rights and protections. The right to access clear, straightforward, and easy to understand information is imperative. The right to fair treatment, also equally important. Right to privacy goes without saying. And the inherent right to utilize various mechanisms designed for resolving disputes is also of paramount importance. These rights are aligned with the Asgardian Constitution, supreme values, relevant laws, and will not be infringed on in tax-related matters involving Asgardians. Future-proofing. As we are a digital nation, most activities involve digital systems and space-related initiatives. This paradigm includes, and please let me know if anyone that can think of any that we have forgotten, electric commerce, digital transactions, cryptocurrencies, blockchain technology, and smart initiatives aimed at future-proofing and adapting new challenges. To support the framework, the Asgardian finance minister is authorized to establish a task force or agency responsible for making recommendations, compiling reports and presentations, reviewing data, mitigating risks, and evaluating integrative systems, and undertaking necessary procedures. The goal of this is to ensure that Asgardia's tax laws and how these laws are enforced remain forward-thinking, sustainable, adaptable, and manageable in relation to all potential tax relationships. Enforcements and penalties, social contribution and community investment, and then we come to the end. One more second.
Very nice piece of work. Thank you so much, Sarah. Really clear. Very satisfying. If you think about it, I'm the only person here who's actually been a member of British Parliament, and we're producing things which are much easier to understand than what they do. To me, this is a natural piece of work, natural progression. And from what's been done before, we thank Alexander Rizzi for his work as well. This has been in the workings now for about 5 years. So questions or comments for Sarah, if anyone has any. Okay. And Sarah's basically covered it. So I don't think there's any need for you to add anything because Sarah's covered the whole document. So, okay, John, you do want to say something? Go ahead.
Yes, well, there were some very good comments brought up in the chat, and there were really good observations. That the term 401k got put in there, and unfortunately, I'm an American, and 401k, I just think everybody knows what a 401k is, but because we have it, it's really strong. It's a savings plan. So And it was brought up that that is more of a United States thing. So I already made a note of it, and we'll probably change that to saving to a some or to a savings plan. Just the word savings plan instead of 401k.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much indeed, John. It's very easy for us to forget what is states or regional or cultural. And we have to make sure that whatever we write will make sense in 100 years' time to somebody who doesn't come from the country that we live in on the earth. Ricky.
Yes. On the collection of taxes now, is that going to be a big paperwork shuffle, or is the Asgardia Tax Department going to go ahead and keep a listing of the taxes the individual would owe and collect those taxes at the same time? And then once tax season comes around, like Estonia, they'll send a text message saying, okay, this is how much you made, this is how much tax we collected. And then if you agree, you hit yes. If you disagree and you'd like them to go back over it, then you hit no. And they'll go back over and see if there was a mistake made or not. Is it going to be done in that fashion, or is it going to be a big paperwork shuffle where you got to fill out a lot of stuff every year?
Sarah?
We have no intention of creating a massive amount of paperwork. First of all, I mean, I understand we're digital, but the purpose of this is to be simple, is to be straightforward, and is to be just very transparent and easy to understand. My guess, as I am definitely not the Minister of Finance, my guess is that the system that will ultimately be created for not only tax reporting but for tax collection will be hopefully in compliance with the tax law, very easy and very straightforward. I am aware of Estonia's tax practices. I think it's brilliant. I think it's easy, and this tax law is not designed to be encumbersome and nothing like the American tax code. So. Yeah, I'll just leave it at that. So my hope is it's very easy and it's very transparent and straightforward.
Okay, because like I said, I like how Estonia does their stuff, and like here in the Philippines, if like you got a savings account and it makes interest, the banks take care of the tax on that. You don't have to do anything like you do in the States where you got to list your interest income and then that gets taxed. You got to do all that on paperwork and stuff, whatever form it is. But here they go ahead and the banks take care of that part of it for you and the government, basically, which I think is pretty good.
It is pretty good. I would say my feeling is simple on this, which is everyone says they want to have a simple tax system, but then they spend all their time trying to close loopholes. If you've got enough money, you don't pay tax. That's just how it is. People just avoid it. I think there has to be a degree of recognition that every tax system depends on some kind of trust, some degree of trust of the population. Otherwise, it's just hopeless. You just end up talking to yourself, pretending that you can fix things when you can't. John.
Yes. Well, I just want to tell Ricky that one of the areas that we looked into in developing the provisions within the Tax Act was Estonia's tax system. So it did have some influence in our development of the. I will say this, that there is no tax reporting system for Asgardia residents. no reporting for the workers. There is, like I said, it does account for a worker tax on the advancement of these programs that they may that they can choose to decide to go into, but they don't have to report that. They don't have a reporting requirement, not the workers themselves. The the government just all they do is simply send a report to the finance minister, and the only people that really have any reporting requirement at all, or only entities, would be the enterprises themselves with their IP and the various things. And of course, the minister will set up how that's done. And but with the instructions that it's that he tries to use, if you notice that what she's showing on the screen right now, smart technologies and cyber platforms, whatnot, and having a registered tax reporting system, or having a create a register. Anyways, to try to make it as simplistic as possible. Similar, and it was actually the justice minister himself who suggested uh, areas out of the Estonia system. So, those were definitely considered when drafting some of the provisions. But yeah, the goal here is to make it as simple as possible. And yeah,
everybody says that. Everyone says that, and then the systems become ridiculously complicated. The challenge is to accept a certain amount of cheating is always going to happen, and just do what is reasonable in order to prevent it, instead of just follow some impossible dream which pretends that there'll never be any cheating ever again, in my opinion. That's my view, because I used to spend a lot of time in meetings in Parliament where people talk about, oh, we've got to stop these loopholes. Well, if you stop the loopholes enough, you just drive all the business out of the country. It is my opinion that we have problems in the United Kingdom because what should be a strategic approach towards fund tax raising has become a tactical chasing of individuals, ignoring the fact that it begins to make the UK perhaps look like a less attractive place to invest. Now, I could be wrong about that. I'm not trying to make a political observation, I'm making a practical one. And we want to be a place where everyone says we've got to come to the Asgardian economy because it's a cheap place to operate. Anything else for Sarah before I ask her to summarize, and we'll have a quick 10-minute break, the only break, and then we'll do the last two. Okay, last word to you, Sarah.
I am really impressed with just the group of individuals who contributed to this second reading. Just, starting with the original legislation that Alexander Rizzi created, and then just, where we have come with all of the input from all of the different committees has been it's been a joy to watch. So I'm very excited about the legislation. I'm very proud of the legislation, and I really hope that it does the best not only to support Asgardians, but to support a thriving economy. So thank you for your time.
Yeah, well, soon, Sarah. You still sound a bit ill, but I'm sure you'll get better. Human body is its own best cure. Somebody said to me they were being ill for 2 weeks. I said, illness is the way that nature makes busy people rest. So here's the lesson.
Well,
Thank you.
When you're in healthcare, typically you're surrounded by people who are sometimes not super healthy, so it's kind of inevitable.
Yeah, super carrier. Thank you. Let's take a 10-minute break. It's just to have a quick look where we are. We've done the opening announcements. We've done the Prime Directive Act, Competition and Fair Trade Act, Contract Act, and Tax Act. We've only got 2 more to go. They probably won't take very long. But let's just start again at 14:50. That's in 11 minutes. This is the only break we're going to have. 11 minutes time. And I would expect the Copyright Act is only going to be very quick. And then we'll finish with the Consumer Protection Act. And I expect we'll be finished by 15:30. I think we'll be finished by 15:30, as I predicted. I could be wrong, but I think that'll be about right. Thank you very much. So stay online. I'll be here. I'm just going to put my camera off because I've just made some phone calls, but I'll be here. Get yourself a cup of tea or something, as I will do, and then I'll see you in 10 minutes, and we'll continue. And I think Rebecca will probably play some great videos for our viewers around the world. See you in a few minutes. Welcome back, everybody. Thanks for being here. We're going to get two more pieces of legislation done. Just for those who don't know me, I'm Len Bitopic, the Chair of Parliament of Asgardia, the world's first space station, and we are doing an Asgardia Legislative Forum. That's where we discuss matters which, in this case, are going to be voted on at the next digital sitting of Parliament on the 21st, 22nd, and 23rd of February. We've covered 4 pieces of legislation. We have 2 to go. One's very quick, and then the final one will probably have a presentation from John. The way we do it in these meetings, sorry, it looks like Sarah Clark's actually given me her illness just down the system. She's gone now, but there we go. The way we do this is we discuss it and we actually vote at the digital sitting. So there's very little to be said about the Copyright Act from Ria and me. It's pretty much ready. I might ask John to just share his LMRG perspective. That's Legislative Merit View Group perspective. Any questions on that? And then we'll finish with Consumer Protection Act. I expect we'll be finished by 3:30 GMT, which is in 38 minutes or so. Might be sooner, we'll see. So Ria has said to me she's happy with the changes and the way that the Copyright Act looks. She has no issues with the content of that now. Ria's not one to talk when there's no need to talk. So let me just ask John, is there anything you want to say about the LMRG, the review group's perspective on this piece of legislation?
Well, I would say that it was definitely one that got worked on a lot, and definitely had a lot of input come in on it. But everything got integrated and everything got considered, and I think it's a very comprehensive act. I think it covers. The one thing I did want to mention was one of the things that was decided in the LMRG, because at first going into the LMRG, even with my own way of thinking, I was thinking of the Copyright and Contracts Act both as framework laws, but we had to reconsider that because the framework laws had already been established. Like with the Copyright Act, the framework law would have been the Digital Properties Act. Mm-hmm. So we needed a more comprehensive law that actually explained all the intricate details that you normally would not get in a framework law. Framework law is very broad, and the next law in line will usually be less broad. It'll be more specific, and this is definitely more specific. And it was actually Mark Beer that brought that to my attention. So, and I have to agree with him. I definitely have to agree with him that it needed that development. It needed that more specific development. And that's and so yeah. But I think we've done a really good job. So and I'm glad that Ria approves of all the changes, and I look forward to voting yes on it in the next Parliament session.
Excellent. Thank you very much. I've got nothing to add really to it. It's a lot of work just to explain 2 things about it. Copyright matters because if you come up with a good idea and then somebody else can steal it straight away, there's no point in coming up with a good idea. If you can't make money or get recognition from the thing that you've put together, why make the investment? Some people still will do. Open source tech could arguably be regarded as that. Open source programs and IT maybe could be regarded as that, but mainly people don't have the opportunity to just do things for free. So the Copyright Act protects Scardia's intellectual property, if you like. And it's quite complicated because there are questions like how long do you need to protect it? how similar does something have to be to the original before it's breach of copyright? And perhaps most importantly of all, what is it that we need to protect in the first place? The Copyright Act that Ria's put together with input and help and the work of the LMRG is a really good piece of work. So I won't go through it line by line. You can read it. And we will go through it in more detail at the final reading of it, the third reading, the final reading of it at the next digital sitting. But I'm satisfied that this really is a piece of work that tells us what we need to protect. Nothing's perfect. There's always going to be someone who's going to steal ideas and so on. And I was once told, don't be angry about it, because if you've had good ideas before, you'll have good ideas again. But actually, in line with the other things that we're doing, having a strong confidence that your work will bring rewards to you is a great motivator. And that's what this is all about. That's all I really want to say about it. You can have a look at it line by line. It is quite a long piece of work, and it's quite technical. So if people have questions now, that's fine. Otherwise, Ria's happy with it. I'm happy with it. And I think with the LMRG and also the Justice Committee, it has to be said, Peter Morn's been here, and also he's here now, in fact, and also the Minister, Mark Beers, has had a look at it too. So all the key players have seen it. Are there any questions or comments anybody wants to make before we move to the final piece of legislation today? Excellent. Okay. Thank you. Thanks, and thanks to Ria as well. Thank you very much, Ria, for what you've done. Your work speaks for itself. John, let's finish with you. Asgardia consumer, that sounds wrong. Let's finish with your piece of legislation as opposed to finishing with you personally. The Asgardia Consumer Protection Act. In fact, I'm so impressed with John's work that if I do manage to organize the Grand Tour in the States, John will be one of my key destinations to see wherever that is most sensible to go, and as is Sarah. Ariadne knows I want to go and see her, and hopefully TJ as well, and Carol. So, John, you've got the Consumer Protection Act. This is actually a rerun because we, in principle, voted for this version, but it was regarded as a little bit too rushed. So this time we're coming back with a piece of work which was improved for the indicative vote, but since then there have been more changes as well. So over to you, John.
Thank you, Hannah, and we'll put a chicken on for you.
Say again?
We'll put a chicken on for you when you get here. That's a Southern saying that we'll.
Is that a good thing?
Yeah, it's a good thing. We'll cook you some chicken. We like cooking people's chicken when they come see us.
If it's literally that, count me in. That's fantastic. Looking forward to it very much. The food in when I went to Dallas was absolutely outstanding, and they couldn't have had a better host as well. This is Sarah's mum. Right. Okay. So over to you, John.
Yeah, and I would say that when I was doing the tracking page on this, and I had forgotten just how old this act was. But when I was doing the tracking page, where I had to look up its history, and the Consumer Act actually started back in 2019, so it's been around a while, and it was actually presented in one of the physical sittings, the physical sitting I got sick in, by the way. So I want to give a presentation, of course. Oh wait, I need to share my screen, don't I? Damn it. I lost my. There we go. I seem to. Are y'all getting anything?
Blackness. We have blackness. The dark infinity of space after the last star has been extinguished.
I forgot where you were. Boom. Let me get rid of that blackness.
It was very depressing. You've depressed everybody now.
Okay, there we go. There we go. Now we can share screen. There we go.
That's better.
All right, this is introducing the Asgardia Consumer Protection Act in summary. Of course, this edition is 9 December. Brought to you by the Trade and Commerce Committee. The Asgardia Consumer Protection Act aims to empower consumers, ensure fair and transparent markets, and promote trust. It seeks a level playing field for all, regardless of economic status, and establishes principles for a fair marketplace. The Act promotes consumer confidence, efficient regulation, impartial dispute resolution, protection of consumer rights, and encourages transparency and sustainability for economic growth. Of course, the core principles, the Act promotes consumer, business, and marketplace confidence through fair, effective, and efficient regulatory practices, ensuring all rights are protected and encouraging transparency, sustainability, and adaptability. In its purpose and definitions, the Act aligns with the Asgardia Constitution, relevant statutes that are already law in Asgardia, UN consumer protection guidelines, and international practices, defining terms such as goods, services, supplier, producer, consumer, and transaction. In the consumer protection policy, the relevant authorities shall establish policies, including systems of administration and implementation, ensuring fiscal restrictions and service availability remain manageable, and dispute resolution processes remain fair and accessible. Consumer identity and complaints. A consumer is any individual or enterprise engaged in legal transactions, and all consumers have the right to lodge complaints with the entity from which they acquired goods and services, or through the Trade and Commerce Authority. Consumer rights. Asgardia consumer rights include equality, privacy, choice, fair marketing, cancellation, accurate information, repair and compensation, safety, redress, and dispute resolution, and of course, fair contracts. The consumer protection evolution, the Act is provisional and will evolve as Asgardia grows, promoting sustainable development and encouraging the creation of legal instruments to enhance provisions. And the notifications. Enterprises must notify Trade Investigatory TIA of business practices that, oh, wait a minute. Yeah. That's why articles provided comprehensive details as requested. That may not have should have been there. Yeah, merger. Yeah, this got mixed up in the my other slides. I thought here we go. Consumer protections. No, yeah. I apologize. I thought I had erased these.
It's not a disaster. It's not a disaster, John. you've got enough cachet to make a mistake from time to time. So don't worry.
Everyone is a consumer, and a strong Consumer Protection Act empowers them by safeguarding fundamental rights. This act enacts pillars ensuring security, equality, fairness, and transparency in the marketplace. Please vote yes, and thank you for your support.
That was short, much shorter than I expected, John.
Yeah, well, it was easy to summarize, much harder to create and develop.
When you think about how much time you put into that, it's almost offensive that you did it so quickly. It's offensive to you, that is. Oh, thank you. Thank you, John. Probably it took as long for you to get that piece of legislation right as it took for Benedetto to decorate a space station. Peter, let's go to you.
Thank you, Chairman. Good day, everyone who is here, and thank you for coming. The situation with me is that I'm chairman of the Justice Committee as well as Deputy Chair of Parliament, which at one time was a very onerous position. It's important now, but it's not so onerous. Because we have Mark Beer, who is a wonderful Minister of Justice. He's a practicing lawyer like me, but he's full of ideas, and he loves to shape legislation before it goes through. And B, because of John Fine. John Fine's group, which shapes and molds the legislation before it comes back to Parliament, has done such an amazing job that we've had hardly any questions raised today, because there's no need, because it's all been presented so well. And I think in this semi-public forum, I wanted to record my thanks, and the thanks of the Justice Committee to John for everything he's done, but also to Mark Beer for everything he has done and is doing. We are turning into a well-polished machine for producing legislation, which is the way it should be, but it's been much more difficult in the past. Thanks to John and his group, it's much better. So congratulations to all of you, and also to Lembit Opik, our Chair of Parliament, whose idea it was to create that group. It's all wonderful. I'm so proud to be an Asgardian and to hold this position in Asgardian Parliament. So thank you, everyone. Well done. A comment from me is nothing else I can criticize or comment on, because it's all so good. So thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you very much. Anybody else would like to make a comment on this? I'll just say one thing from the technical point of view. This has been around a long time. You heard that. It's gone on and on and on. But it's not about how fast we do things. There has to be efficiency. But how well we do things. We have to get things right. And I think we've got this right now. John actually did the ACE Act, Asgardia Companies, an Enterprise Act, I think it's called. That was in its day the longest running piece of legislation, and there's no doubt that was frustrating for John, but we get things done, we get things fixed, and I think with the LMRG process, which actually does make it more complicated but also more professional, it's easier to follow and understand. It also takes the pressure off me, because one of the bottlenecks in the system was that everything had to go through me, through that spot in the middle. And now we've got a freestanding committee which does work, which is done more effectively, this one occasion, more effectively by committee. Initially, I suppose I had to do most of it because I was one of the few people qualified by nature of having been a parliamentarian. But now you colleagues have so much experience, we don't need everything to be done by me all the time. And fair play to John, he really has become a practitioner, and he's actually, from an academic point of view, more formally qualified than any of us to do this, I think. John also says, good observations, perhaps we need to change the savings plan. That was from ages ago. I meant to say, yeah, that I happen to agree with you, but that's a different matter. So any other points on this one? Because what's going to happen next is this will go to third reading and hopefully then for decree. Does anybody have anything else they want to ask or comment on this? Could it be, John, that finally, after all these years, this is going to become a piece of legislation? We shall see. We'll see. We'll see what happens. Right. Okay. Thank you. I'm not going to extend that unnecessarily. I just want to make one general point, though. As you can see, with all of this legislation, it's helped a lot by the LMRG process. First readings don't go through it. I still manage the first reading part. I actively and personally involve myself with the creation of the principles and so forth. Carl and Ferd have done a great job on the first reading of the Prime Directive Act. I'm wondering if it's a little bit on the long side at the moment, but that's not really a deal breaker because it's so well written. We just use the number of words we need for the purpose of getting the job done and having the right legislation which will still be effective in 100 years' time. That's a really important thought. So the other ones, all the other ones have been through the LMRG process. Keeps John quite busy, but I'm so grateful that he's willing to spend the time to do that. Okay, so let me therefore move on to talk about future. So that's the legislation, and I'll summarize in a minute. Looking at future events now. So we finished with the legislation. I've just got two things to remind us of in terms of future events. The first one is that the entire purpose of today is to make sure that our next digital sitting on the 21st, 22nd, and 23rd of February 2025 is really good. It's our first sitting for this calendar year, and we'll be voting on all of those 6 proposals as things stand. And 2 of them will, if passed, then go for approval by Head of Nation. So please do attend on the 21st, 22nd, 23rd of February 2025. Secondly, and unrelated to that, I understand that the LifeShip spacecraft, which is we observed taking off, or some of us observed being launched as a result of very well organized Asgardia live event online, will be landing or attempting to land on the 1st of March, day before my birthday, actually, on the moon. And I expect that we will be having an event on that day as well. So more information when we know it. I don't know what time of day that's going to happen. It'll be interesting to see if it actually happens, if it lands. If not, whatever we had on it will still arrive in some form, but it would be a bit messy. So I'm hoping that it will be a soft landing. And I guess that will be one of the theme parks, one of the points of cultural interest when human beings inhabit the moon. That seems to be the most likely thing that's going to happen to these places. The most important of which I would say is probably when Neil Armstrong first set foot on the moon. I imagine that will be tremendously important. I imagine that original footprint has actually been blown away by the rocket blast from the rocket engine that took the lunar module return vessel with Buzz Aldrin and Neil Armstrong back to the command module. But it's exciting. On the 1st of March, it'll be the first time we've actually sent something in electronic form on behalf of Asgardia to another celestial body. So that's really exciting. I'll remind you about that before then. And one more thing related to my first point, we're going to have some great speakers at the next digital sitting as well. More of that to come. I'll be able to share that on Thursday, but I know we have 2 really good speakers coming up as well. So those are the 2 future events I wanted to mention now. Some people ask me, when is the second LifeShip going up? And that's the one with our DNA on it. I don't know yet. I'd like to attend the launch if I can. Launches tend to shift around a bit in the diary, so I'm not sure if I can reliably come to watch it, but then I'll watch it online. Shell's got the idea of having an event in Houston, well, at the Space Center, Cape Canaveral, I think it's called. which would then enable us to attend it. Cheryl herself, as you know, did attend that launch, and it was very dramatic. It was very impressive, I have to say. So more on that in the future, but things to remember are the 21st, 22nd, 23rd for our digital sitting, and importantly, the 1st of March for the attempt at a moon landing by the life ship with Asgardia's cultural artifacts upon it. Of course, naturally, we have on Thursday, we have our normal meetings, Piedmont, the 5 o'clock meeting and the 6 o'clock meeting. I'm thinking of suggesting we change the time a little bit, but I won't do that now. I'll just talk to Peter. I'm thinking of changing it from 5 to 6 to 6 to 7, but we'll see what happens on that. Partly because I'm always compromised on the 5 o'clock meeting. I'm never always standing outside a swimming pool because my child goes to a swimming class. Parenting is a great level, as anybody with kids knows. So those are the future events. Let me now summarize what we've done today and then ask if anyone has any other business. We began with the opening of the Asgardia Legislative Forum, and we reviewed the agenda with some announcements. Then further, Enan covered the Asgardia Prime Directive Act. That was followed by the Asgardia Competition and Fair Trade Act, second reading of that, as opposed to the first reading of the Prime Directive Act. That was with John Fine. Then Riedel submitted for us the Asgardia Contract Act second reading, which is a rerun because we looked at it before, but so many changes have taken place. We're doing the second reading again on the advice of the LMRG. That's the Legislative Merit Review Group. Then we heard Sarah Clark on the Asgardia Tax Act second reading. That's been in the business system for like 3 years now, something like that. So I'm hoping that we can actually get the tax situation resolved this year. Though it's possible that we're going to recycle. It's so important we get that right. So maybe patience will be a virtue on that one too. But who knows, we could get this through in the next 2 sittings. Then we covered the Asgardia Copyright Act, third reading, a very complicated and lengthy piece of work with many revisions, which thankfully Riedel has been managing for us. And just now we finished talking about the Asgardia Consumer Protection Act, third reading. So the Copyright Act and the Consumer Protection Act are at their final stage. If Parliament approves those, then they go for consideration by Head of Nation and hopefully for approval. I've covered future events, and therefore all I've got to ask you is, and also I was roughly right on time. I said 15:30, but is there any other business anybody would like to cover today? Ricky?
Yeah, just call me right after this, okay?
I'll do it right away. All right. Thank you. Yeah, I'll call you on WhatsApp. Yeah. John?
I just wanted to mention Mark Beer is definitely a voice worth listening to when he interacts with us, and both within government and within the LMRG, or even within Parliament itself. And I will say that he was very impressed with many of the acts. He was extremely impressed with the Tax Act, and his views on it were that it was very. He was very impressed with the way it was developed, and the end result that come out of that development. So I think that that's a good sign, on it. And but it wasn't just the Tax Act; it was other acts that he was also ultimately impressed with. So, but he did express those expressions when he through email. So I just let everybody know that he was very impressed with a lot of the work that came out of the LMRG and all the people that were involved, including the sponsors. So yes, I just wanted to let everybody know that.
Thank you for that. I have to say that the team is working very well, and it took quite a long time to get the LMRG set up, but that review group does seem to be working well. And we've now got a modus operandi, a way of operating with the Minister for Justice as well as with the chair of the Justice Committee. I'm quite impressed with all of that. And we are putting in place things which hopefully will stand the test of time. We haven't done any of this development the development in haste. It all works, I think, quite methodically and quite sensibly. So congratulations to John and to everybody who's been involved the last few months in getting this running. Any other business apart from, I want to clarify, is it actually Ferda's birthday today? Is it Ferda's birthday? Happy birthday, Ferda. Where are you? Can't see her now. Maybe on the list. I hope it's not too late
She's
to wish.
gone.
Oh well,
She's gone in this moment. Yeah,
if
because he
yeah,
has a
cool.
party.
That is fine. Oh, that's what it is. Okay, I'll better wish her happy birthday as well in that case. Fred, if you're watching this afterwards, happy birthday to you as well. Happy Earth birthday. Great. Well, thank you, everybody. I think we're finished in that case. Yeah, a reasonable estimate, 2.5 hours or so. We got everything done. I will see you all on Thursday. Ricky, I'll speak to you in a minute. And do send Fred a birthday wish if you want to. Really appreciate your time, everybody. We're efficient, we're sensible, and the LMRG is another time saving because a lot of the work is done there instead of here. And that is just superb. Thank you, everybody. So with that, if you've been watching, please join Asgardia, become a resident. It costs you 100 solas, dollars, or euros, or pounds to become a resident of Asgardia. And then you can be fully involved in the civic life of the world's first space nation and the world's first fully functioning digital democracy. Nobody else has done what we do, and it's just tremendous to see this work so effectively. I'm proud to be the chair, and I hope that you enjoy the way in which we operate. Your support is essential to the future of all humankind, and to have the first permanent human space habitation and the first child born in space under responsible, ethical, and medically safe conditions. That's what we're doing all of this for. And who knows? I hope that some of us will be in space to see it. Have a great rest of the day. We can stop the recording now. Just say that you can find out more about Asgardia by putting Asgardia Space Nation in any search engine. It'll come up straight away. So, Ricky, I'll call you in just a moment. We got to 29, so actually,